What's good, y'all? Welcome back to the Playmakers Corner podcast. I'm your host, Simon Voyanos, aka Coach V, and I'm bringing you another player spotlight. At the time I'm recording this, it is June 2nd, 2025, so in case there's some information that I'm not updated on, there's your timestamp right there. And like I said, another player spotlight episode. We're doing these in place of team season previews in an attempt to go ahead and go back to our roots and focusing on the individual players. And so on this episode, we're going to talk about a lot of 5A quarterbacks, but these are the younger quarterbacks, the guys who got to start, or at least a lot of them got to start as underclassmen, if not being standouts on JV, freshmen. But, you know, we've also done our research. We've watched these kids outside of those structures as well, whether it's practices, workouts, 7-on-7 film, what have you. But this is the future of Colorado football with these quarterbacks here. Almost all class of 27, one class of 28, which we will talk about at the very end here. But a lot of great quarterbacks to talk about on this one. And so without further ado, let's go ahead and hop right into it. Let's start this thing out by talking about the Mullen starting quarterback, class of 27, Koa Dietrich, 2-year starter, by the way. Started as a freshman, won newcomer of the year for us, and then played his sophomore year as well. Let's go ahead and look at the stats. Freshman year, his newcomer of the year, 2,297 passing yards, 22 touchdowns, only 7 picks, 226 rushing yards, 2 rushing touchdowns in 11 games. But then his sophomore year, he did see a little bit of a slump here. I know Mullen struggled with injuries up front on their line and had a bunch of different combinations, which is tough since they have a lot of good linemen over there. But sophomore year saw a significant dip in efficiency, still threw for about 2,057 yards, but 14 touchdowns to 13 interceptions, and then rushed for 207 yards and 2 touchdowns, it looks like, in 11 games. So definitely a little bit of a dip in production here as teams are figuring out who he is. So there's one. And then second, obviously not having your offensive line is really going to impact you. It did not really seem like Mullen had a good, consistent run game, or at least an efficient one. And it kind of felt like they wouldn't commit to just airing it out on a majority basis here as they tried to make the run work, which against some teams it did work. But obviously against actual playoff teams did not work as well as it could have. So there you go. Let's get to the film breakdown in itself, though. Overall grade right now, going into his junior year, gave him a 76.95, which I think is pretty solid. There's a lot of quarterbacks at this point in their career that are in this range here. Most of the quarterbacks we talk about on this episode are actually in that range. Let's talk about his highest grades. The 3 highest grades I gave him a 4.3 out of 5. This is a 5 category, obviously, in agility, speed, and short accuracy. He's a good athlete. I kind of wish he used it a little bit more. You already have your options and whatnot that I know they're running over there, but I mean, as a passer, if it's not there, just go take off, right? See the lane, see the openings, go get the first down. The only problem is that just looking through the film, there are a lot of times where it would be a 3rd and long. There were a lot of 3rd and longs, it felt like, or 2nd longs or something like that for Mullen. And I honestly, on 2nd and long, you could still take off and you still have 3rd down to throw for a first, but there's not much you could do on 3rd and longs when they are daring you to pretty much beat you through the air, and they're playing pretty deep there. So a tough scenario, but he definitely has the athleticism to be a good dual threat quarterback. He could throw the ball just fine, but as an athlete, I think he's underrated. He's definitely somebody who I feel like could run for 1,000 yards if they really wanted to, while also throwing for 2,000 passing yards in an efficient world, at least in an efficient world that I'm imagining there. So there you go. Short accuracy wise, he could throw the quick game, especially on the run. He's very accurate in that range. Now, his 3 lowest grades, let's talk about it. I gave him, and these are all out of 5 again, but I gave him a 3 out of 5 on throwing the run accuracy and pocket movement. On the run, downfield, there are definitely some issues. When he's throwing short passes, it's usually fine, but when you get to the medium range, so 15 plus pretty much to deep, it gets a little iffy, right? I think it could be better. Did not see a whole lot of instances where he had to throw on the run deep, or he had the opportunity to even do that, but it is something that I would like to see moving forward, and I think we will going into his junior year as he gets more experienced and gets stronger as a football player. Now, when it comes to pocket movement, I think there are plenty of times where he senses the pressure, he knows where it's coming from, but he either tries to bail out, rolling all the way out right or left, or he drops way too deep here, pretty much outside of the pocket, and is just trying to buy some time to avoid pressure that's in his face. And I'd like to see him move up the pocket, climb the pocket, deliver strikes over the middle, not waste too much energy rolling all the way out right or dropping all the way back to go make plays here. I think having a line that has been inconsistent, to say the least, the last 2 years has honestly kind of hurt his development a little bit here, and he just needs to stay disciplined, learn to move in the pocket, not drop out too far, because I think there are times where, he's dropping back too far or he's rolling out too far and he's opening himself up for unnecessary hits or just big losses, which with his athleticism, it's not a bad thing. You want him to get out there and maybe get into some space to go do something, but to be a better pocket passer, to be a better quarterback, you gotta know, hey, there are times that I just gotta climb the pocket. I need to deliver something short here to set up this next play where I could have a more manageable second, third, what have you, right? And so I would like to see him continue to work on that pocket movement here and just get better maneuvering from that short space there, because he can also make people miss inside the pocket. He has the athleticism to do that. I think he just needs to put it all together. And then last but not least, lower body mechanics here. Gave him a 3.5 out of 5, which is not horrible. I do think there are times his feet gets a little tangled on his dropbacks and his base is a little bit too big at times there, and then it's not the most efficient thing, or it's too narrow at times. Would like to see that get cleaned up a little bit more. I feel like that goes a little bit more hand in hand with pocket movement, though. Just not feeling like he's able to set and throw, which feels apparent, honestly. And like I said, that's something that I feel like Mullen kind of messed up developmentally, just not having a consistent offensive line, or not even committing to a quicker passing game where he gets the ball out faster and, doesn't have to take those hits. But, that's a Mullen thing. Now, looking at the film notes here, before we look at the film notes, let's actually go down the line and go through every single grade that I gave him here that resulted in that 76.95. But there are 10 categories, so grades out of 10 when it comes to grading quarterbacks. That's frame and timing. Frame gave him a 7.5. He's like 5'11", 182, definitely on the smaller side there, a little bit shorter, also a little bit lighter. Would like to see him continue to put on weight, which he has every single year, but would like to see that continue. Timing, I gave him a 7.4 out of 10. That's the other one, obviously, out of 10 there. I feel like there are times where he just throws it absolutely on the money and it looks great when he has time, right? When he doesn't have time, the timing is definitely off. I even think when he does have time, there are times where, the ball is thrown just a little bit later as he's holding on to it a little bit longer. Would like to see that be a little bit more consistent. Like I said, I feel like when he's going and he feels confident, like he's delivering the ball on time, accurately, all that great stuff. I just need to see a little bit more consistency there. Now, the rest of these grades will be out of 5 here, so let's just go down the line. Arm velocity, 4.1. Arm power, 4.2. I feel like he has a pretty solid arm there. Short accuracy, 4.3. Medium accuracy, 4. Deep accuracy, 3.8. You can see as he has to throw deeper, and maybe this is more of an arm power type of thing, but to me, I feel like maybe it's a little bit more of a timing thing. It's just not as accurate as you want, or at least not consistently accurate as you want there. 3.5 out of 5 on the lower body. Upper body gave him a 4. He has a quick release there. Decision making in structure, a 3.8. And this is where it kind of gets hard to evaluate here, because I feel like in structure, there's a lot of times, at least in crucial moments, where it just seems like the play falls apart. So decision making, I mean, he kind of has to go into his decision making out of structure, which I give him a 4. I think he's solid there. Speed 4.25, agility 4.3, throwing the run power 4.3, throwing the run accuracy of 3, pocket awareness of 3.5. It could be a little bit better. But that's just me. Pocket movement 3, and then scheme versatility, I just gave him your average 4 there for an overall grade of a 76.95. Look, he's sitting at 5'11", 182. He's a good athlete playing quarterback, but Mullen, I feel like, is not using him correctly. He should be so much more of a rushing threat, but only had 39 rush attempts last season, which is not a lot, really, considering he played in like 11 games. So that's, 3-4 rush attempts, which, like I said, not a lot for using an athlete like that. So that's unfortunate. As far as his passing numbers go, he has thrown almost as many interceptions as touchdowns his sophomore year. The talent is obviously there, as he has shown the ability to scramble and throw on the run and make some nice set throws. I think he would almost be better off anywhere else at this point. There's no reason he shouldn't be rushing for 1,000 and throwing for at least 2,000, especially with the athletes they have there. And that's not exactly on him, like I said, and I know I'm being very critical, but I want to make sure I put his background in perspective here. Mullen, I mean, look, the offensive line thing, that's one thing, right? You know, injuries are tough, it happens. But you got to also remember, they have a lot of good athletes out there. They had a number of athletes, including, I'm pretty sure, a guy who made our top 5 senior list last year, who was a speedy wide receiver, ran a legit 4.4, 4.5, right? And then this year, or not even this year, but same as last year, they had a 6'5 wide receiver tight end in Mason Bonner, who, I mean, I feel like they should be feeding him the ball a lot more. But like I said, they are very committed to running the ball, at least more committed than I would be to running the ball with an offensive line that apparently was struggling with injuries last year. And I just don't know how much, or I guess how valuable doing that is when you have a skill group as talented as this one. Because I really do feel like, you know, this skill group should have a couple 1,000-yard wide receivers. Now, speaking of context, I'm also going to say this. Mullen's schedule last year was significantly tougher than any of the other previous years they've played. At least since we've been covering the podcast, it felt like they've always had kind of a cupcake schedule, and then they go into the playoffs and they lose. Last year, they played some real playoff teams, starting with Korean Lutheran, which is a great team out of state, a team that you want to play against to kind of get you ready. They got blown out 35-12. Then they played Castleview, though, who was a playoff caliber type of team. I want to say they were on the bubble, but they lost to them 28-7. Played Ralston Valley, shut out 27-0. Valor Christian, blown out 46-20. Regis Jesuit was a little bit of a closer game, right? At least scoring-wise on paper was, but they lost that one 23-12. Then they beat Vista Peak, who's not a playoff team, 41-20, also not a 5A team. They beat Legacy barely, who I don't think was a playoff team last year, 28-27. They get blown out by Erie 48-13, a team moving up from 4A to 5A. Beat Horizon 40-14, Rangeview 41-6, only to go to the playoffs and lose to Fossil Ridge 49-7. So when it comes down to the stats and the production from last year, you know, we know that they have talented players, but it has to translate when it comes to competing against these other teams. It's not the fact that they're just not good. I could already hear some of the critics out there being like, have you ever considered they're just not good at football? And it's like, yeah, I have, but I've also seen them work out and compared them against other players who are good on winning teams. On top of that, you know, a lot of these guys, there's a lot of guys here that have offers to play on the next level. Not D1. Mason Bonner, I think, is the only Mullen player that had a D1 offer. But other than that, it's like, dude, they got some talent. And this defense is also talented too. They got some talent over there as well. So when it all comes down to it, the offensive side of the ball just needs to be better going to next year. And, their schedule, I don't think it's fully released yet. I'm just looking at it right now. It looks like there's only a handful of games scheduled. Korean Lutheran, Calsavie, Ralston, and Erie are the only ones scheduled right now. But you could probably expect it to be tough again. And this Mullen team has to be better. Koa Dietrich, I know, is going to be better. I know his work ethic. I know how hard he works over there. So I'm not really worried about him. And by the way, as of June 1st, no offers. Which, it's ahead of camp season. He is a junior, right? I don't expect him to get offered. I don't really expect most high school athletes to be offered until they approach their senior year. So after their junior fall season for the most part, right? Unless they're just like that, then they're going to get offered no matter what and no matter when, right? But he has some time for sure here. I think it starts by focusing on his junior year and getting this thing turned around here. This Mullen team can be a very good playoff team and even a contender if you look at all the players they have on the roster, but they got to use everyone correctly here. And for Koa Dietrich, he's a great athlete. He's a great leader who's not going to complain. At least I don't think so. He's going to do his best to get this thing turned around. He is a leader at quarterback that you want to have here. And he's also a good athlete. And so I'm hoping going into his junior year, this is his best year yet. And I think it can be, right? I mean, scoring 24 touchdowns as a freshman, that's one thing. I legit think he could score over 30 touchdowns and have 3,000 yards of offensive production. I don't think that's crazy to say. He has that ability. He just needs to show it. He needs to put it together. He needs to have big games against good playoff teams and really help build the confidence of this whole team here, because this is a talented group. I do think they're being underutilized. That's a whole nother conversation. But this is a team that should be going past the first round of the playoffs. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But I have a lot of faith in Koa Dietrich. I think he's a great player here. I think the three big games, at least so far on their schedule this season, against Korean Lutheran, Ralston Valley, and Erie, are all great opportunities to show what he can do against good playoff teams and even contenders, some may argue. And it's going to be a whole lot of fun seeing what he does here in year 3. It already feels like he's been putting in the work for a number of years now since he's been a starter since his freshman year. So going into his junior year, there's definitely reason to be excited to go ahead and watch Mullen and watch Koa Dietrich. But we'll see what happens. Either way, we're rooting for him and wishing him the best of luck this season. All right, moving on north, let's talk about a quarterback for Fairview, class of 27, Ellison. Last season, I believe, was his first real year starting in those couple games here. Obviously started most of the regular season and the playoffs. So 13 games here. And by the way, got to watch one of his playoff games against Mountain Vista, which was absolutely insane and is where I feel like he really kind of broke out as a player and showed his true potential moving forward. But let's talk about the stats real quick. In 13 games, threw for 2,873 yards, 27 touchdowns, 8 picks, also had 261 rushing yards, and 1 rushing touchdown. Super productive last season, and like I said, got to watch him in that crazy Mountain Vista game where they started in Highlands Ranch, ended the playoff game in Parker because of a weird electrical thing. And, it was a great reset for him in Fairview, and he was able to go in there and find a way to get it done and made some pretty clutch plays to go get it done and get Fairview into the semis, where unfortunately they fell to Legend here. But I think that is a great indicator of how good this Fairview team can be with Ellison in at quarterback. Now, let's go ahead and go to the film breakdown. Gave him a grade of a 78.8 going into his junior season. Here are his 3 highest grades, all out of 5, by the way. 4.35 deep accuracy, 4.25 decision-making in structure. Arm velocity gave him a 4.25. as well there. His three lowest grades, 3.5 for pocket movement, 3.7 throw on the run power, and then 3.8 for straight line speed here. And my bad, I forgot to talk about his strengths. Let's talk about those real quick before I get into his lower grades. His strengths, I mean, he's very accurate downfield. And then as far as decision making goes, I felt like it got better as the season went on. I feel like 4.25 may be a little bit high, and I'm riding the high that I saw from his playoff performances, but I feel like for the most part, he made the right reads. At least when I watched him against Mountain Vista, he made a lot of the right reads. Either the ball just wasn't great, or it was just great one-on-one coverage and the defense won out there. But I really like his decision making, especially when he's under pressure too. That could change. Maybe I need to see a little bit more consistency, so that grade may go down a little bit more here. But I like what I saw decision making wise. For a sophomore to be making these decisions, really impressed me. Arm velocity, he spins the ball very well. Now, arm velocity is not arm power. Arm velocity is more about spin, spiral, being able to throw, an effortless, I guess, not an effortless, but like a very beautiful looking ball. And he has a lot of it, Now, that doesn't necessarily translates always to arm power. There are some quarterbacks who throw a better spiral than they can throw it farther, and I think right now he's kind of in that category of a better spiral than arm power at this point, which is not bad. I think arm velocity always shows potential moving forward. So there you go. Those are his highest grades. Now his lower grades here: pocket movement, I feel like he could step up in the pocket a little bit better, protect himself a little bit more, and get to those second, third, deeper reads into the play. That's just me, though. Throwing the run power, I mean, this is just straight raw throwing power, and it's also him off platform. He's a little bit of a smaller quarterback, and I think it shows when he's trying to run around and then throw it. And so, this is definitely something where if he gets stronger, that could go up. And then as far as speed goes, I think he has solid speed at 3.8. I don't think he's like a elite dual threat on this level. But, he could gash you for 10, 15 yards at a time here. And, it's an issue. It could get a little bit better, and we'll talk about that later, though. Let's go ahead and look at the full grades here. Starting with his 2 Category 10 grades, or categories out of 10. Frame gave him a 6. He's 5'10", 170. Can't do anything about the height, but he could definitely be a little bit heavier there, so would like to see him continue to put on weight. Timing, I gave him an 8.5. I really liked his timing when he threw the ball. Like I said, I don't feel like he has the craziest, strongest arm out here, but timing-wise, I think he's in a good spot here, and so gave him an 8.5. Now going to the categories out of 5. Arm velocity, like I said, 4.25. Arm power, not bad. I gave him a 4.15 here. And honestly, now that I'm looking at that, I might actually just change it to a 4, which will bring his grade down to a 78.65, which is not bad. It's just me nitpicking. But, I mean, just watching him throw the ball, I think he has a solid arm. Like, he could get it downfield, but he is kind of throwing his whole body into it when throwing it deep, that is. And so, obviously, would like to see him put on a little bit more weight. He's light at 170, and there's kind of no getting around that. So, there you go. Now, looking at everything else here, short accuracy 4, medium accuracy 4.2, deep accuracy 4.35. I really like his timing as he throws downfield, and I think that helps his deep accuracy. Lower body mechanics 3.8. His base could be a little bit more consistent. I will say that. He also crosses his legs a couple of times too, which I don't exactly love. Upper body mechanics a 4. Decision making in structure 4.25. Out of structure 4.1. Speed 3.8. Agility 4. He's somebody who's pretty slippery. Like, he's hard to track down and whatnot. So I love to see that. The on the run power 3.7. Accuracy though is a 4. He's very accurate when he's throwing on the run, which I like to see, and throws with good good timing too. Pocket awareness 4.2. He senses pressure well. I do wish he climbed the pocket a little bit better though, which is why he has a 3.5 grade. And then scheme versatility, I gave him a 4 for now. That could definitely go up though. I just need to see him play in more games this season and next season before giving him a final senior grade. So there you go. So with that being said, overall grade of a 78.65, which is not bad going into his junior year. Look, he came on the scene last year and really got hot playing at an elite level in the postseason. Despite being a smaller quarterback, he has pretty solid mechanics and an arm that allows him to stretch defenses downfield. Specifically in the Legend game, there are a couple instances where he would get absolutely hammered, but get the ball off and it would go 40 yards to his intended target. This is a testament to his arm power, also velocity, I would say, and mechanics. He's also a mobile player who may not have the best top-end speed, but has good agility and is a rushing threat on this level. I would like for him to continue to work on his pocket movement and use his legs more as a rushing threat, but I think he can be poised for a big season if Fairview commits to passing, which is a big thing for them. I know Fairview runs a little bit of a multiple offense. They'll run the wing tee where they just run the ball, and then they'll go ahead and spread it out and pass it. And it's interesting, but they are definitely more dangerous when they are committing to the pass and whatnot and doing that first. And I'm not saying they can't run a little bit of wing tee and run the ball, but I think it's important to get your offensive skill players going through the air, at least I feel like. As of right now, June 1st, he has no offers, which makes sense. He's only going into his junior year. He's also a smaller quarterback. I legit think if he puts on more weight, gets stronger, those numbers will only go up and Fairview will only get better. So there you go. But I think they really have found a guy in Ellison here who has shown the ability to rise to the occasion when given the opportunity. And I think going into this season, he's not going to have Jordan Rochelle, which is tough, or Luke Strickland, but he does have Torrey Davis, and that is a heck of a weapon to have. He also has a couple other receivers, which, with Fairview, they always are deep at wide receiver here. I trust their development system over there. And so he's going to have the opportunity to go make another run with Fairview. Now, how deep they can go and whatnot, I think it depends on how this defense reloads, and depends on, like I said, whether they commit to the pass or not. And the other tough thing when it comes to Fairview's schedule, which is kind of out of their control, but their league is kind of weak. So it is a rough go. I don't want to say rough go. They're going to win all these games, right, against these teams that they're obviously better than. But it kind of sucks to do it against teams that aren't really challenging you, and then you get into playoffs, and it might feel like they're way over their head. But they do have 2 games that I'm looking at right now that I feel like will be good games to challenge them. Starting with September 5th, they play Arvada West. That's a team that'll also throw the ball, so they'll challenge their defense. And then defensively, they have a good front 7, which will challenge that line and see how well they hold up against a playoff caliber defense. So there you go. Then they play Fossil Ridge, who is always, I guess, the second strongest team in their conference. That is pretty much at the end of the season, October 23rd here, which will be a good tune-up for playoffs, but obviously that's a game you would like to have a clean game against. Either way, I feel like he is poised for a big season here. Torrey Davis is a heck of a wide receiver 1 to be throwing to, and so you really can't go wrong with that. You could build an offense pretty much around those 2 if you really wanted to. But obviously there are other skill players who I feel like are poised to break out. And Ellison will be big time in that breakout season for those players. So there you go. We'll see what happens going into his junior year. Obviously, if he wants to play on the college level, a good junior year is very important going into this next season. I think he could do it. And so we'll see what happens, but definitely rooting for him and wishing him all the best as he goes into this 2025 fall season. All right, now moving on, we're going to talk about a quarterback who plays for the team that Fairview eliminated last year in Mountain Vista, and that is class of 27 Marquise Reese. It's worth saying, up until this point, so going into his junior year, has only played on freshman/JV, but has been super productive and has been very good in sevens and practices and other things that we have watched here. He's been given time to learn from Austin Modreski, one of the best quarterbacks of all time here, and I think it's going to pay off going into next season. With that being said, I assume there's going to be some sort of quarterback battle with his other competition there, and so all of this is tentative based on if he wins that quarterback battle. And so we'll see. So no stats from last year. Let's just get to the film breakdown. And mind you, this is me going off of the limited varsity film and JV film that was available to us. But he has an overall grade of a 75.15 here, which I feel like is not bad here going into his junior year. A lot of this could definitely change. Like I said, going off of a lot of junior varsity and freshman film, and then the limited varsity film that's there. But let's start with his highest grades, his three highest, all out of 5, 4.35 when it comes to arm velocity, 4.3 throw on the run power, and then I gave him a 4.2 for arm power and lower body mechanics. Like I said, watching JV film here, but it's obvious that he throws the ball pretty effortlessly with a lot of power, with a lot of velocity here. And I mean, it looks good when the ball comes out of his hands. I think there's no denying that. His lower body mechanics as well, I gotta shout out those. His freshman year, a little iffy, right? Going into his sophomore year, they definitely improved here, a little bit more consistent, and actually a lot more consistent, and I like them a lot. So there you go. Now, his lowest grades, 3.5 out of 5 for pocket movement and agility. A little stiff. I feel like the agility may not be as fair. Didn't see him, have to run as much and put on moves on as many people. That could definitely go up. Pocket movement wise, I would like to see him climb the pocket a bit more to get to his next reads, but on this level, it felt like a lot of his splash plays, he really did not need to get to his next reads. His skill players were just that much better. Would like to see that improve, though. And then I gave him a 3.7 on medium accuracy and throwing the run accuracy. Throwing the run accuracy, it could be a little bit iffy. I think it's inconsistent. And then when it comes to throwing over the middle, it's inconsistent. There are times it's on the money, timing's great, right? It's perfect ball placement, but it's a little noticeable that he struggles with placement over the middle, as well as timing and all that stuff. And it's tough because when you're comparing him to someone like Austin Modreski, who's the only other quarterback that's out there playing when he's playing for the most part, at least on varsity films, Austin could throw over the middle pretty easily, right? And so that is something that I would like to see Marquise work on it, and I know he's working on it, right? I know he's working on that stuff, but that's something that kind of pops up as, well, can he throw a dig, between defenders on the money consistently? I don't know. I mean, we'll find out this season when or if he wins the job and gets more varsity reps here, but we'll see for sure. Now, looking at the rest of his grades, let's just go down the line, starting with his category 10 grades. 8.1 when it comes to frame. He's now 6'3", about 197. Would like to see him playing at that frame, though, before that goes up, and it definitely can. Timing gave him a 4. I think it's solid. We'll see how consistent it is going into this year. Arm velocity, 4.35. Arm power, 4.2. Short accuracy, 4. Medium accuracy, 3.7. Deep accuracy, 4.1. Lower body mechanics, 4.2. Upper body, 3.9. His release is a little interesting, is what I'll say. Not elongated, but interesting. Decision making and structure, 3.8. Out of structure, a 4. Speed, 3.8. That could even go up, to be honest with you, but we'll see how he fares against varsity talent. Throwing the run power, 4.3. Throwing the run accuracy, 3.7. Pocket awareness, 4. Pocket movement, 3.5. And then scheme versatility is a 4 right now. It's always tough breaking down the film of someone that's on JV. And by the way, no offers as of June 1st, obviously. But just projecting forward, he has a skill set that can be used in this type of offense that Mountain Vista uses, where they throw the ball a whole ton, right? On top of that, I also think he might be a little bit more of a rushing threat than Austin was, and so that'll help them out. I don't expect him to be as good as Austin. I expect him to be his own player and, do his thing there. But it will look a little bit different. I think physically he has a lot of talent. He has a strong arm. He's mobile, right? And he's a taller quarterback, 6'3", to about 200. That's about prototypical for a next level quarterback. So you like to see that. But it comes down to putting it all together on varsity, which is still going to have talent. I know they graduated a lot of players, but this wide receiving group is very talented. You have, I believe it's Brooklyn Bailey, who's a speedster. You have Japri Jennings, who could be due for a big-time season. He's a reliable wide receiver over there. They got players that you should feel excited about. Their line should be pretty solid this year. I believe coached by Matt McChesney as well. And so Marquise, he will have a lot of weapons. He'll be able to make a good run and be productive. But this season's going to be tough. No doubt about it. To start the season, they play Liberty. And I'm not talking about Colorado Liberty. I'm talking about Cali Liberty, a powerhouse who won state, I believe, just a couple years ago in California. I think they get to host them, so at least there's that. And that's going to be tough. We'll see how good Marquise Reese is, but this will be an opportunity for him to go out there, show what he's got, right? Following that, they play Arapahoe, which is a playoff team this year, and we'll talk about, ideally, their starting quarterback this next season later on in this episode. That's going to be tough. They also play Cherry Creek in the regular season on the 18th. I kind of like that scheduling. I'm not going to lie. Get that team out of the way. You're going to see the best of the absolute best. And then on October 3rd, you have Valor. Let's keep it a buck. Valor Christian hated, I'm going to say this again, hated how their game against Mountain Vista went last season. Arguably the most humiliating loss in program history. Definitely the most humiliating regular season loss, I would say, where Mountain Vista basically 50-pieced them, or at least it felt like they did. And you would be a fool to think Valor Christian is not trying to come back and get their get back. And now that's a talented Valor team over there. But when this Mountain Vista team is going, especially on the offensive side of the ball, they make it interesting, right? The last couple of years, they made it interesting when the offense is going. And so for Marquise Reese, if he becomes the starter for Mountain Vista, having a good game against Valor, that's as good as it gets, right? That'll solidify him as a starter, solidify him even as a next level quarterback, and that'll be huge. So a lot of pressure on that game, I would say, for sure. Battle for Highlands Ranch this upcoming season, at least I would think so. And so that'll be a big game. But you have a lot of big games where if Marquise Reese is the guy, he's going to be able to shine in one of these games, if not at least the majority of these games, show some sort of potential here. And that's great. Challenges, those are always great opportunities to rise and play up to your potential. And I think he can do that this season. He has the arm talent. He has the skills. He's sat behind Austin for 2 years. His time has come. And so it's going to come down first to him winning the quarterback spot. And then second, it's going to come down to him winning game after game. And this season, it starts out rough. It gives him no choice but to play well or lose these games. And so it's going to be very polarizing to see what happens, not only with him, but this Mountain Vista team in general. Either way, we're rooting for him. We're wishing him the best season going into his junior year, his first, hopefully, full year of varsity games, and it should be very exciting. So, shout out Marquise Reese, and looking forward to what he can do this season for Mountain Vista. Moving on, we have a player who's very interesting, I think, going into his junior year. He started last year as a sophomore, and that is Cash Williams, the 6'1", 170-pound quarterback for Chatfield here. Last season, his first real year starting as a sophomore, 11 games played, threw for 1,393 yards, 16 touchdowns, only 4 picks, but also had 466 rushing yards and 3 rushing touchdowns, as I feel like he was just getting started. Now, Let's go ahead and get to the film breakdown here. Cash really impressed me. He has the highest grade out of anybody on this episode, and arguably the highest grade out of, looking at his underclassmen film, out of any underclassmen that we have evaluated. I gave him an 83.65 grade, which is up there for a reason. Now, let's talk about his highest grades. First off, gave him a 4.35 when it comes to speed. Cash runs, or at least his fastest track time, was an 11.1 or 0.2, I want to say, which is really good for a quarterback. A little surprising even for a quarterback. And even looking at his track times, that one did seem to be a little bit of an anomaly, ran in the wind, but he also consistently got times in the 11s, which I think is really good for a quarterback. I feel like that translates to a quarterback that can run and be a dual threat on the next level, the college level. So there you go. Did not run as much as he probably could have, but he definitely has some speed. On top of that, I gave him a 4.3 out of 5 on his throw on the run power. His arm talent is kind of insane. He could make throws all over the field, and doing it off platform is not new to him. He could do it and still make a lot of the same throws that he could make in the pocket while standing and set and all of that. And even then, his throws on the run are better than some other quarterbacks' throws while just being still and whatnot. So really loved watching him improvise out of structure and stretch defenses downfield. He's very dangerous at that. And then I gave him an 8.6 for timing as well. He throws with great timing all over the field, whether he's on the run, whether he's set. I really liked watching him throw the ball because it was on time all the time. Whether it's short, medium, deep, he has just a natural knack of throwing it on the money on time, and you absolutely love to like that. I also gave him pretty much a 4.3 out of 5 on medium and deep accuracy, upper body mechanics, and agility. Medium and deep. He is just a very consistent thrower of the football here, and has shown that he can make some very impressive throws downfield. His upper body mechanics is really good as well as a good release, and then agility wise, that kind of goes hand to hand with speed. He can make some people miss and be a legit dual threat quarterback. Now his lowest grades, I gave him a 7.5 for frame. He's 6'1", which is good. He just needs to fill into his frame a little bit more. 170, pretty light. Would like to see him eventually get to that 200-pound range before he leaves high school. I think he'd be in a good spot if he can do that. So there you go. I also gave him a 4 for decision-making in and out of structure and pocket movement. I feel like he could have been a lot more productive this season, but there are times where, he was inconsistent with his decision-making, and I feel like with the talent he has, if he was more consistent with his decision making, then his stats would have been better. He would have been more productive. Chatfield probably would have gone farther in the playoffs, which, is me nitpicking. Now let's go to the full grades here, the full breakdown. So starting with the 10 categories, 7.5 for frame, like I said, 8.6 for timing. Now going to the 5 categories. Arm velocity, 4.4. He could spin it. Arm power, 4.25. Short accuracy, 4.2. Medium and deep, 4.3. Lower body mechanics, 4.2. Upper body, 4.3. Really like his mechanics all around. I feel like it allows him to get the most out of his throws. Decision making in and out of structure, both 4s. Speed, 4.35. Agility, 4.3. Throwing the run power, 4.35. Throwing the run accuracy, 4.1. Pocket awareness, 4.3. I also think he climbs the pocket pretty well, so 4. And then scheme versatility, a 4.2 there, for an overall grade of an 83.65 for Cash. Look, Cash might be the most impressive quarterback in the state. He throws with great velocity, and his arm power allows him to challenge defenses wherever on the field. He saw a very productive sophomore season as the first-year starter, and I think that is only his floor. I would love to see improvement from his pocket movement and footwork, but as well as seeing him put on some weight so that he could withstand hits. But altogether, I like where he's at. For him to move forward He needs to be very detail-oriented, work on those little things, and get efficient when throwing the football. I think he is a talented enough quarterback where he should be scoring 40-plus touchdowns, right? He has a great receiving core over there. The line, I think, is solid enough. I think the coaching is good enough. For Cash, it comes down to executing on a consistent basis. You got to come away with points on every single drive. And there are just times throughout the regular season and the playoffs where I think what comes to mind first, I want to say, is that Ralston Valley game where he wasn't super efficient and it just took too long to get going. Tried to put together a drive at the end. Unfortunately ended with a dropped pass on 4th down. Can't have that happening. You got to be more productive earlier on in the game here. And I mean, just looking at his stats all around and looking at the individual games and whatnot and how those went, I will say there were times where it felt like, they were focusing on other aspects of the offense. But moving forward, it feels like this will be Cash's offense. And so it's going to be up to him to play very well. I'm looking at the Columbine game, 4-5 for 40 yards. I don't know if he got hurt or what happened there. Also had 5 carries in that one, but you got to be more productive against a team like that. Against Denver East, they lost by 3, only threw for 167 yards, right? At 12 carries, that pretty much went nowhere. And I'm sure some of those are scrambles as well. So you just got to be a better decision maker here. You got to become more efficient. You got to score, I would say, on every single drive. Those are things that will have to happen. And for Chatfield, going into next year, they're going to need their offense to be super productive. They're going to need their offense to take a step forward and be scoring more than what they did last year, right? And so we'll see what happens with that. I'm also realizing now that I'm looking at these stats, I don't believe this included their playoff game against Fairview, but obviously I assume that did not go well, considering they eliminated them there. So there you go. No offers as of right now, June 1st. It's still pretty early. I think for Cash, he needs a big junior year for colleges to really look at him and be like, okay, it's not a one-hit wonder, right? He's shown good, consistent success over time. Let's go ahead and go offer this guy. And I think he will be bringing in these offers soon here. But he has plenty of big games this season to prove himself. To start, Dakota Ridge. I think this is a team that's going to be better than what they were last year. Or at least better than Chatfield, than where Chatfield was last year. And so that's going to be a big game where he needs to be on top of it. He needs to be sharp in that game. Following that, they play Ralston Valley. This was a team they only lost to by 3-2, and they only scored 12 points against. He has to have a more efficient game against that team. Then they play Denver East. That's a team with a lot of potential. His old coach, Coach Thomas, I guess he still coaches them, but old Chatfield coach, Coach Thomas, will be the head coach of that squad, so he'll be familiar with Cash's game. That's going to be a big game. That was a 3-point loss last year. You want to get that one back as well. Then they play Arvada West. That was a close game, and arguably one of his better games, where he really showed out and was a big contributor to them winning that one. You got to keep that one rolling, right? And even be more productive too. And then lastly, they play Columbine. I feel like if they are aggressive on offense and they're scoring and they make this thing a track meet, then they can beat a Columbine. But you can't beat them if you go 3 and out without point, or even if you go 2 offensive drives straight without points, right? There's not enough time in the game to come back from Columbine potentially being up by 1 or 2, right? And so you got to be the aggressor on offense. I think Cash has the ability to do that, and I'm excited to see him do that. Either way, Cash Williams, a very talented quarterback. Physically, he has a good skill set here, but still a young quarterback going only into his junior year. You got to start putting some things together, and making this thing work. Chatfield, they have a lot of talent over there. I think they have good coaching over there. You got to get productive here in his junior year, and I think he can do that. So we'll see. We'll see if he could go from being kind of a good complementary piece to the center of this offense. Either way, rooting for him, excited for this junior year for Cash Williams. I think he'll really show out and show why he's one of the best quarterbacks in the entire state. So there you go. All right, now for the last quarterback we're going to talk about. He's our only class of 28 quarterback from Arapahoe. That is Theo Lee. the 6'4", 230-pound quarterback. As a freshman, only played JV and freshman last season. I think he got like a couple snaps in the Cherry Creek game, but nothing significant to go off of that. So most of this film is off of that JV film that we got. And it's very tentative. I think I went very conservative with this grade. I'm waiting to see how he does on the varsity level. But honestly, with Theo Lee, there's some things that he is just different about. First off, 6'4", 230. He might be the biggest quarterback that we've evaluated. Maybe not ever, but he's up there. Since we've started evaluating players in 2021. He's a big boy playing quarterback, and he could sling that ball. Let's get into the film breakdown real quick. So overall grade, 74.55. Very tentative, though. We'll see what he does going into only his sophomore year. But his three highest grades, frame is an automatic 9. There's a lot of quarterbacks who wish they could be 6'4", 230. But that is a 4-star, 5-star build if I've ever seen one. Arm power, I gave him a 4.5. He has an excellent arm. Could stretch it downfield. One of the strongest arms we've ever seen. Probably comparative to a Leslie Richardson III that we evaluated from Smoky Hill in our very first year, who had a similar build to him. But arm power, off the charts. He could sling it. And then I gave him a 4.35 out of 5, that is, on throwing the run power and arm velocity. By the way, that arm power was also out of 5, so there you go. But throwing the run power and arm velocity, like I said, he can throw this ball. There's a lot of heat on the ball when it comes out of his hands, and putting him on the run, throwing off platform, really doesn't change that too much. Now, his 3 lowest grades, and these are all out of 5, by the way, gave him a 2 for speed. If he's not outrunning JV defenders, I don't know if he's exactly going to be burning varsity talent. Not really his game, though, so I'm not too worried. But gave him a 3 out of 5 on these 3 grades here. 3 on agility. Like I said, not really a dual threat, so to me it doesn't matter as much. Still could move pretty well for somebody at his size, though, which is worth noting. And that could even still be improved on, as he's only going to be a sophomore. Gave him a 3 on pocket movement. I feel like he doesn't really climb the pocket, and he didn't really need to in his JV film, just because he's open, he's just going to throw it. Or, Theo, he's also just big enough where he could absorb a hit from a JV player and still launch it downfield. And someone's going to run underneath it. So not really a lot of opportunities to climb the pocket and get to your second, third reads and make a big splash play there. But just in general, something I'll be looking forward to as he does play on varsity. And, he's not really a dual threat, so he's going to have to get good at climbing the pocket, maneuvering the pocket, and delivering strikes. Buying those, small amounts of time to go ahead and extend the play and make the right play and get some yards on every single one. So there you go there. And then I gave him a 3 out of 5 on deep accuracy, which is not bad. I mean, 3 out of 5, that grades out to a 6 out of 10. For us, that's just about average, maybe a little bit below average. I think he has a strong enough arm where he could just put it up there, at least on this level, just put it up there and someone will run underneath it. He's going to probably have to throw with a little bit more touch on the next level. We'll see. We'll see what happens there. But there are times where, the ball, it got there. It wasn't the greatest placement. I think working on that placement, which I know he has throughout this offseason, that'll definitely help him out quite a bit here. And you'll see a leap forward from freshman to sophomore year. At least I think so. But that was definitely something, just looking at his freshman film, I was like, all right, well, he has an arm. It's not exactly the most accurate arm, but it could be fine-tuned, and it will be fine-tuned. So we'll just have to see about that. And especially when he's throwing to varsity players, it's going to look different, trust me. So there you go. Now, just going over all the grades before we move on to some of the final notes I have on Theo Lee here. Alright, so starting with the 10 categories, gave him a 9 for frame, gave him a 7 for timing. I think the timing could use a little bit of work. Like I said, throwing deep, there are times where the ball placement was a little all over the place, still ahead of the DB and ahead of the wide receiver, but would like to see some better timing to really put that on the money here. Gave him a 7 out of 10 on that one. Now the rest of these categories are out of 5. Arm velocity, 4.35. Arm power, 4.5. Short accuracy, 3.7 could be a little bit more accurate here. Medium accuracy is actually not too bad. I liked some of the passes he made over the middle. Like I said, it's against JV film, so I'm going with the conservative grades here, but I'm giving him a 3.8 there. Deep accuracy, a 3. Lower body mechanics, a 3.7. I think there are times where his feet get a little bit tangled up, and I think there are times where his base is a little bit too wide, or too narrow, and so that just needs to become more consistent. Upper body mechanics of 3.9. It looks good right now. A little bit of a slower release, but the way the ball jumps out of his hands, I mean, it's hard to ignore. It's hard to ignore that, right? And I think that velocity with the ball coming out of his hands makes it look like a quicker release, but it is definitely a little bit of a slower release. The ball just comes out very live, though. Decision-making in structure, I liked what I saw. I gave him a 4. We'll see how that holds up on the varsity level, but a 4 for now. Decision-making out of structure, 3.5. I do think there are times he gets a little too excited and is looking for the big play downfield. Obviously, against varsity talent, he's going to have to reel that in and become a little bit more accurate. Speed and agility, 2 and a 3. Throwing the run power, 4.35. Throwing the run accuracy, a 4. Really liked his throwing the run accuracy, honestly. We'll see how consistent that could be on the varsity level, though. Pocket awareness, 3.5. Pocket movement, a 3. He, like I said, did not need to maneuver around the pocket as much. So these are pretty much base grades. If I don't see it, I usually give, these athletes around a 3 or so. That's about average for me. But you'll have plenty of opportunities to prove me wrong there and boost those grades. And then scheme versatility of 4.25 here for an overall grade of a 74.55, which is not bad for a freshman, approaching a 75 grade here, at least looking at some of these other quarterbacks that I've graded and whatnot in the past. Look, I'm just going to put this out there. Theo probably should have got more playing time on varsity last year in some capacity. He may be one of the most physically gifted throwers we've ever seen. He throws with tremendous power and can get the ball to spots that even some senior quarterbacks struggle with. He is an effortless thrower of the football. With that being said, he's not the best athlete as a scrambler. He is agile enough to maneuver a pocket and extend plays, but that's about it. At his frame, he can shake off tacklers, literally just shake them off, and that helps him extend plays. Theo does need some refinement, though, which could be a good cause to why he didn't play any varsity snaps last year. His footwork is all over the places with crosses and him throwing off his back foot quite a bit. He needs to have a good habit of throwing with a good base. There are some throws deep that are off target as a result of some of that spotty footwork. So there you go there. And that affects his timing and all that stuff down the line and accuracy. His upper body mechanics are fine for now, but I'd like to continue to see him develop a quicker release, especially off platform. He has a little bit of a wind up when throwing off platform. Going into next year, he should be the starter, but expect some growing pains. He's going to be a first-year varsity starter. I think there's already a lot of pressure, as is with, our attention from all over the state for him to play at a high level, being a bigger, quarterback and whatnot. But he's just got to focus on his game and take it game by game. If he can't get over that, though, and continue to learn and grow through his pains and all that, I think a wrap roll becomes dangerous. I think they become dangerous to the point where they could be a dark horse contender for state if Theo Lee comes out and plays at a high level, which I think he can. He has the physical ability to play on this level, and not only to play at this level, but dominate on this level. Now, it's going to come down to refining the small things, working on the little things, adjusting to the speed of the game on the varsity level, right? Which, looking at their 7v7 success over the summer, it looks like he has somewhat adjusted to the speed of the game and whatnot, which, it's going to be different when he plays tackle football. It just is compared to 7-on-7, right? But it's not exactly something to overlook. It's a good thing that he has found some success in sevens. But what it all comes down to, what it all builds up to, is him putting it together and it translating to the varsity level. And on top of that, they play in the Centennial League. This is the SEC of Colorado high school football, one of the toughest leagues. You got Cherry Creek, you got Grandview, you got all these other teams that are so good. He's going to get challenged. And so I think the good thing about that is that you're going to see how he stacks up against quality defenses. D1 players, right? Cherry Creek, they got a million D1 players. If Theo Lee is going to develop into a D1 player, he needs to give it his all when he plays those teams and then see where he's at. And then once he sees where he's at, he's got to make his goals. He's got to continue to build. He's got to continue to get better. All of the great quarterbacks nitpick themselves. And I think he can do that and rise to the occasion and be very good. I think all the naturals, all the physicals, it's there. You know, you can't argue with the arm power, right? You can't argue with the arm talent. It's there. Can't argue with the frame. 6'4", 230. Better than 99% of quarterbacks in the state. It's there. It's going to come down to the little things and whether he can accomplish that. Regardless, we're rooting for him. I think I am just very excited to see him potentially get that starting job over there at Arapahoe and take over a program where they've been pretty good the last couple years. But they have been one elite quarterback away from taking that next step. It's a lot of pressure to put on a sophomore quarterback, but we wouldn't be talking about all of that if I didn't believe he was capable of it in some sort of capacity. So there you go. Either way, rooting for Theo Lee going into this next season. It should be a fun one. Should be extremely exciting. Oh, sorry, talking about big games going into this next season, by the way. This is the first game listed on their schedule. I don't know if this will be their first game, but they play Mountain Vista. That's a team that's going to throw the ball offensively. They're going to get going. We could see a little bit of a quarterback battle potentially between Marquise Reese and Theo Lee. That'll be a whole lot of fun. Either way, Arapahoe, they're going to rely on their defense, I think, first and foremost. That's just kind of their identity. But offensively, they're going to have to be able to put up some points against a team like that. Then they got the Milk Jug game against Heritage. It's been a long time since they've lost, so I don't see them losing, but this is still a big game regardless. Then they play Pine Creek, another team with some talent. That's a team they should beat, but, you know, still talented. Then they play Grandview, another team that always has a lot of talent, right? They play them on the 3rd, and then they play Cherry Creek the following week there. So that'll be a tough 2-week stretch right there. But we'll really see what Theo Lee and this Arapahoe team is made of after that stretch. And then you obviously have playoffs. I would recommend watching every single playoff game because it's going to be exciting, I think. Regardless, it's going to be exciting going into this season. So there you go. Like I said, rooting for him. It's going to be a big year for Theo Lee and for Arapahoe here in the 2025 fall season. All right, and once again, that'll do for this episode. Thank you so much for rocking with us. Remember, we'll be having player spotlights Monday, Wednesday, Friday for most of this summer here, and all of these players, they have made our watch list, and those lists will come out or start coming out in July. We do them for every single position. These are players that we believe are next level players and are some of the elite special ones in the entire state. On top of that, we'll be doing girls flag football players here soon as well, spotlighting them and what makes them great, just like we do here with the boys. But make sure you go ahead and follow us on social media, show some love there. Then on this episode, like, comment, subscribe. Tell us what you think about some of these players. But until next time, I'm Coach V, and I'll catch you later.